The purpose of NYA is to help you find out what job you can do best, to give you a chance to handle machine tools under working conditions, with other workers, under a shop boss.
I had gone to that NYA school in Newburgh, New York, and we studied aviation ground mechanics. There was two things they trained you for. One was an engine mechanic, and the other was, I can't remember other than that it was all about the airplane, the airframe, the wings, the tail, so on. I got most of my training as an aviation engine mechanic. Well, when I finished that school in Newburgh, I was 17 years old, almost 18. And so another fellow and I went down to the recruiting station and joined the Navy. I expected to get what is known in the Navy as a kiddie cruise. You go in at 17 and you stay till you're 21. Well, the Navy in its anyway, the Navy says, well, they didn't call me in and swear me in until December 12th. Now I'm 18. And so I got 6 years to do instead of 3. Well, after boot camp, I went back to Great Lakes and they assigned me to Navy Pier in Chicago, Illinois at the aviation, it was an aviation ground mechanics training center. Actually, it was repetitious of a lot I'd had in the NYA school, but the Navy saw fit to send it to school anyway. So I went and I graduated from that school. I was there about 21 weeks. So now I'm a petty officer, 3rd class, and I was able to volunteer as a gunner. It was completely voluntary. I didn't have to do that. From there, they transferred us to Naval Air Station Miami, and we did more training now in the airplane itself. At the time, it was a TBF, was the torpedo bomber. There was a single turret. The turret had a single 50 caliber machine gun in it. I rode backwards, so I never knew where I was going. I always knew where I had been. I eventually was sent into VT 87, which was going on one of the Essex class carriers. I went from VT 87 into VC 9. And for some unknown reason, which I don't know to this day, I didn't get assigned to a crew. I was being carried as a spare. And then they decided to switch us around to the Pacific. So they put us on the USS Wake Island, and we got into Pearl Harbor, unloaded the planes, and we unloaded the squadron. So VC-9 now is transferred over on the other side of the island to Kaneohe Bay. I'm still not attached to a crew. And I flew with various pilots at times, but that was to get experience and etc. But still no crew. And they sent us to Guam. They put us on a Jeep carrier, and they sent us to Ulithi Fleet Anchorage. That was something to see because the whole area was full of nothing but ships. Now they're preparing to invade, to go to Japan. But first they want to take Okinawa. And the strange thing was we carried a parachute rigger who was an air crewman. He was a gunner on one crew. And the day before we go into combat, they decided he can't do that. So I ended up in that crew. I was unfamiliar with him. I didn't know the pilot. I didn't know the radio. And you're kind of a little bit tense.
Troops of the U.S. 10th Army invade the southwest coast of Okinawa. The attack is preceded by 9 days of intense shelling and bombing by the 5th Fleet.
So I'm now at the Battle of Okinawa, and we attack shipping, we attack land-based radio stations, and anything that supported the Japanese that was in any way used for wartime use, we shot. I was told to shoot at targets of opportunity, which a lot appeared, that you shot at. There's no doubt about that. And you had to be very careful with the Japanese. They went into their kamikaze stuff especially at Okinawa, because they wanted to get rid of the ships, because the ships could do damage to the land-based everything. And most of them were not interested in shooting at us. They were more interested in diving into a ship. When they would go into a situation in which the ships were shooting at the Japanese airplanes that wanted to hit the ships, we would leave the area. The American airplanes would leave the area. One of the things they'd say, flash red, and when they said flash red, they meant it. Because if you didn't get out of there, you were going to be shot down by Americans. And I can remember watching the little boats going to the shore. They were Higgins boats off of Navy ships carrying Army, or could be Marines, could be whatever. I was glad I was up there. I wouldn't say to you that I was scared to death, but I was frightened. I remember them shooting at us, and I can remember one day, I'm flying backwards now, and you could see this white ball coming up and blowing up and coming right at us. It's moving. So they probably had radar-controlled guns, the Japanese, and we were attacking some island. And I do remember that. That bothered me.
Navy films show units of Admiral William F. Halsey's Third Fleet battling the heavy seas of a typhoon.
One night we were south of Okinawa. I remember them giving the order to tie down all the airplanes on the deck, that we were going to get into bad weather. Well, that night, I can remember being in the ready room with a can of peanuts, and I can remember the chairs being ripped right off the deck because the ship was rocking so heavily. We lost no ships during that typhoon, but the previous typhoon, they lost 6 ships. They actually turned over. So they were bad situations. And yeah, I was scared during that typhoon.
The camera records a smashing defeat of the Mikado's air power in the South Pacific.
It was the day after that typhoon. We had the benches that we sat at to eat, and I would just put my leg over that bench, and I felt, the ship shuddered. Then they yelled over the bullhorn, General quarters again. The guy came in from the rear of the ship. There were 2 of them, and he strafed the deck of the ship. And I'm not on the deck, thank God. I'm down in the chow hall. And so he got up to he got up just north, I say just north, but just a little bit north or beyond the elevator that they brought the airplanes up and down. And he nosed it over and hit the ship. And he had a 500-pound armor-piercing bomb. When he hit that, he hit the anchor winch. So he did very little damage to the ship itself. He killed 1 officer, and the rest of them were injured. That was about 6:30 in the morning, and at 10 o'clock, that ship had been repaired to a point where they were launching aircraft to bomb the island. The ship now is damaged. It can't drop a hook. It can't anchor anywhere. And we used to go into Karema and rearm. So they decided to send the ship back to Guam for repair. And so we, and a DE, which is a destroyer escort, I'm glad they sent us with somebody. And we got back to Guam okay, and they put us in a flight personnel rest camp, which is a place to lay around and do nothing, and get 2 cans of beer a day, or 2 Cokes. And all of a sudden, the yeoman come in, and he yells, we're going home. So we threw shoes and stuff at him because we thought he was lying. But it was true. And they put us on a USS Admiralty Islands, which was another Jeep carrier, and we ended up in to Alameda, California, and then home for a leave. I was in Times Square on VJ Day, and that's the picture of the guy. I wasn't that sailor, but I wish I was. Anyway, I was in Times Square. I was alone, and because I was home on leave from the war, and I can remember on 8th Avenue in a bar, and they was so jammed that they had to pass the beer up to you. You're out in the street, and sometimes you ended up with that much beer in a glass because the rest of it got spilled. But well, after the war ended, I had 3 more years to do. So all of the reserve guys that were in the service and all, they went home. I was sent to Sand Point, or U.S. Naval Air Station, Seattle, and was there that I was stationed on a flight line, and we were running up airplanes, keeping them ready for flyaway to the desert where they were storing them. And one day, a person comes in and calls about 8 names, and mine was one of them, and said we were being transferred to the USS Missoula. And the Navy named cruisers after cities. So we thought Missoula, Montana, we thought, oh boy, we're going to be on a cruiser. Then that's very good duty. We get down to the dock and it's an APA, which is a troop carrier. I end up, they assigned me to the fire room. I know nothing. I know absolutely nothing about the ship. I was just an aviation machinist mate. And we left and headed for Japan. And what we were going to do was pick up troops and bring them back home. So we got to Yokosuka, Japan, and then we went to Okinawa, and we went to Guam. In each place we picked up more troops. And we ended up in San Francisco, and they discharged the troops. We tried to get back to an aviation command, and he wouldn't transfer us. So I can't advance. The only thing I could do was work. I was a warm body, and in my opinion, the Navy treated me badly. In the meantime, I had met a girl. I eventually married her. After 2 years, we got married, and that was when I got out. I had Bill and Tom when Korea came along. So I had 2 more kids and a wife, and but the Navy saw fit to take me anyway. So I did that time in the Korean War, which was, thank God, not overseas.
United Nations troops have seemingly sent the bulk of the communist forces fleeing in defeat.
I worked with a group of airplanes. I was first class petty officer, so I ran the flight line, and we were doing SNJs as a training airplane for these recalled pilots who, by the way, were not very happy. Most of them were unhappy people because they had started a life and they had kids and family and jobs. So they didn't want to be recalled any more than I did. I did 22 months in when I got recalled. We were attacked by the Japanese, and so we had to go and do something about it. I was always proud of what I did.